Hotaro was seemingly an average high schooler who has just entered high school, but from his perspective the entire world looks gray. He's initialist and believes in his motto, that if there is anything that is not necessary to be done, he won't do it, and if there is something that is necessary to be done, he will do it as quickly and efficiently as possible. He lives in modern-day Japan with his family, and is a complete loner who hates having a life. Today is the first day of school, and he has made up his mind that he will spend all of these years alone, spending as little energy as possible without getting into any pointless endeavors, that at the end of the day provide no results. He walks inside the campus, and is immediately put off by all the high-energy students, welcoming the newcomers and trying to coax them into join their clubs. He walks straight through them, puts his shoes in the locker, and moves to his class, where he meets up with Satoshi, which his best and only friend, and has known him for almost all his life, being familiar with his quirks, and his philosophy of making as little effort to achieve anything as possible. He hacks him up for the new day of school, as it brings endless possibilities, but Hotaro refuses to show even a little enthusiasm. He asks him why he is still in school anyway, as he is the kind of guy who immediately walks back home as soon as school is over, but Hotar hands him a letter with a sigh. Satoshi opens the letter, which is from Hotaro's sister, who is in India for the time being. She wrote a letter to him which arrived yesterday begging him to join the classic literature club, as no one usually does according to her. Every single year the number of students wanting to join the club decreases, and she is afraid that it will be shut down. Before long she claims to have a special connection with the literature club, and tells him to join it to prevent it from dying. Hotaro harbors a lot of love for his sister and ends up agreeing to her requests taking. She assures him that he won't counter any difficulties because there are no other members of the literature club, so if he joins, he'll have a whole classroom to himself. This actually makes Hotaro a little bit happy, as at least he won't have to spend his energy to talk to someone else, and he bids Satoshi goodbye, before going to the staff room to get the key. He arrives at the classroom allotted to the literature club, and is thankful for the fact that it is in a very remote location, inside of the school. He puts the key inside of the lock and opens it up. Once he enters the room he is surprised to see a short black-haired girl watching outside of the window. She turns around and walks up to Hotaro, introducing herself as Uru. She claims that she already knows Hotaro, as they were in the orientation together, which shocks Hotaro as there were a bunch of kids there and he didn't even notice Uru was there. She tells him that she has joined the club for some personal reasons, and asks if Hotaro has also joined the club. He however quickly refuses, saying that he hasn't, as now that the club has a member it will live on, and you won't have to join any clubs. He turns around and starts walking before telling her to lock the doors. When she leaves, however tells him that she cannot lock the door. He asks her why she can't do it. She replies that she doesn't have the keys. Hotaro looks at her confused and produces the keys from his pocket, handing it over to her. He asked her if she didn't have the keys how did she lock herself in. She looks at him confused and asks whether the door was locked. Hotaro realizes that she had no idea she was locked, and this makes the girl curious, as she wants to solve the mystery of how the door can be locked when she doesn't have the keys. Satoshi also enters the class as he comes to check on Hotaro and Eberly gets intertwined with the mystery. Futaro tries to leave again, but the girl grabs his hands, and asks him to please help her solve this mystery. That moment hooked Hotaro, who has never felt anything like this before. He ends up obliging and asks her whether she saw anything to miss. She replies that sometime before she came in, she heard a clanking sound, and when they all focus their ears they even heard clinking noises. They go out and spot the janitor, who is closing up all the rooms that were unoccupied because he has the master key. They all realize that the janitor must have thought that the room was empty because of its remote location, and shut it up, without Erin noticing that she had been walked from the inside. Everybody was satisfied that she was able to know the truth, and they all walked near their lockers. She asked Satoshi whether he would like to join, and even though he has multiple clubs, he agrees to join. Hotaro tries to tell him that he isn't joining, but Iru again grabs his hands and asks him to join. Hotaro again melted her touch and ends up giving her his application card, making her an official member of the literature club. The next day, Hotaro comes to school, and after the day is over is forced to stay back and write an essay that they got for homework. Satoshi makes fun of him for not completing his homework on time, but he replies that he simply forgot to bring the homework to school. Satoshi laughs at it and starts telling him about a new mystery inside of the school. According to him, In the morning the girl was coming up from the grounds while it was raining outside. She heard the beautiful melody of classical music playing in the music room. But it was entirely dark. She gets intrigued by it and opens the door, but is horrified to see that the piano is empty, and the room seems to be empty. The melody is still playing however, and her heart starts beating faster. The piece starts coming to an end. As soon as the piece ends, she feels a chill run down her spine and a scraping noise. Suddenly from the floor a figure appeared, which hair are all messy and has bloodshot eyes. She staggers to stand and starts walking towards the girl, by which time she shuts the door and runs away as fast as possible. He finishes the story and looks at Hotaru excitedly, but his gaze is met by the same unenthusiastic face as he starts writing away the piece of paper once again. Suddenly however he asks Satoshi whether this news has rotated around the school, and when he says it is a pretty big deal, he immediately feels like Uru will soon come over to him and ask him to help him figure out the mystery. He immediately takes out a piece of paper and starts scribbling something, before telling Satoshi to tell her a make-believe story about the mystery of the secret clubhouse. Uru arrives perfectly on cue, enters the room and walks straight over to their desk, asking whether they have heard about the music room mystery. Hotaru however, quickly cuts her off and tells her that Satoshi was telling him about a very famous mystery at the school. She immediately gets hooked and Satoshi makes up a story about a secret club known as the Spider Club. This is a ghost club in which no one knows who the member is or how they are selected. It is said that they always put their notice on the notice board, but only a select few people are able to find it every year. This immediately intrigued her and she asked whether they would help her find it. Futaro finishes his essay at that very moment and tells her that yes he will. They all voted the novice board on their floor and rummaged through it, but are unable to find anything of substance. Finally Hotaru advises that maybe they should go down to the main notice board, which all of them agree is a good idea. They make their way to the ground floor, and are awed to see the notice board filled with so many posters from all the numerous clubs around the school. The nose board looks like a war zone, as all the clubs want to portray their clubs on the main board, so that they catch more eyes. They start looking closely at the board and see through almost every poster, but start losing hope, when suddenly, Hotaru draws their attention and informs them that he found it below one of the posters. He shows her the small notice for the Spider Club, but she doesn't seem to be very impressed by this. She tells him that she gets the feeling that this mystery wasn't a mystery to begin with, as there are many loopholes in it. They however realize that is getting late and decide to part ways. Satoshi and Hotaru start walking back together, when Satoshi asks him why he crafted the lie and created the poster for the Spider Club, and then he puts it below the other notice. While no one is looking, he looks at him and tells him that he simply didn't want to go to the music room, as it was on the farther side of the hall, and not on his way to move outside the school. Satoshi looks at him in awe, and starts laughing before asking whether he has any idea about the mystery of the music room. Hotaru looks at him and says that the music room is almost always occupied by really passionate students, who have given their entire lives to music. The pianist especially has a habit of sleeping inside the room, as she doesn't want to waste time, so she closed the windows in the rooms and slept while playing a CD of classical music on the tape recorder, which acted as an alarm, as when the music gets over she will realize it and wake up. That is why when the student opened the room, she saw no one at the piano, but heard the music playing, and as soon as the music stops she woke up groggy, with bloodshot eyes because of the low amount of rest, which scared the living daylights out of the poor student, and she ran away. Satoshi looks at him in awe, and tells him that his energy-conserving ways will be put to the test, because of Iru, as she seems to be the only one who can force him to work. They then split up to go back to their homes to get some well-deserved rest. A month has passed since the last incident, and Hotaru seems to have gotten used to this new routine. Most of the time he doesn't mind it at all, because he only has to go there after classes for a bit and sit and read a book, which he doesn't really mind anyway. He likes it best when Uru doesn't talk to him and simply reads her book, but she has developed a cute habit, where she offers her some of her homemade sweets every time he sits down to read. One fine day while reading the book in the after hours and enjoying his tea, Uru suddenly stands up saying that this is not how a club is supposed to be. Hotaru looks at her and tells her to sit down and not waste energy on useless things. She however complains about how their club is monotonous, and they never do anything for fun. Hotaru looks at her and tells her that their club is supposed to be a literature club, and not some sports club, where they need to perform activities. She however is adamant, and tells him that they should start preparing for the upcoming school festival. Hodoro tells her that he has no interest in doing anything for the school festival whatsoever. Uru tells him that she won't hear anything about not doing anything for the school festival. He looks at her exhausted and tells her that they will also open some dumb stalls like any other club. But she refuses him. She tells him that the literature club has had a very rich history, and every single year, people from the club have created an anthology for the festival, and they should do the same. Hotaro outright refuses to have anything to do with that, and tells her that he doesn't want to spend so much energy on anything, and would rather do something low effort. She keeps pestering him to the point of asking whether Hotaro thinks that creating an anthology would be less work than dealing with her every day, pestering him about creating an anthology, so he agrees to her demand. He asks her whether she has any idea about how this thing has to be created, to which she replies that she doesn't. He asks her how she will do this if she has no idea how the anthology has to be written, but she replies that they will just find the previous year's copy, and then learn how to write it. Hotaro is again frustrated, because of the work she's making him do, but he can't say anything because of how dedicated she seems, so they both start searching through the entire room for the copies of the previous year's anthologies. They are unable to find the anthologies in the room, so Hotaro sits down on his desk, but she tells him that they are not done yet, and drags him out to the library, as she believes the library will have the copies for sure. In the library they see a short-haired girl sitting behind the counter named Ibarra, who seems to know Hotaro, and makes a face when he comes inside. She tells him that if he is up to no good he isn't welcome here, but he retorts of the wisecrack on his own, pissing her off. At the very moment, however, Satoshi appears inside the library, and Amira's temperament immediately changes. It receives confused at this sudden change, but Hotaro says that Ibari used to like Satoshi during her middle school days when they studied together. Satoshi is a guy with maxed out riz, and can make anyone's water break just by speaking to them in his charming voice. He asks Hotaro what he's up to, and he replies that this is more of a hostage situation, as this absolute numbskull Uru has forcefully retracted him from his seat, where he had happily glued his ass, so that he doesn't have to move. Satoshi laughs at this, and goes on to introduce both Uru and Ibarra to each other, and Uru gets straight to the point, asking her whether she has seen the previous year's anthology from the literature club. Ibarra looks at Hotaro and smirks, asking how the hell did a loser like him actually join a club, but like a true Sigma. He tells her to shut her trap. She turns towards Uru, and replies that she doesn't have any idea about the anthologies, as she hasn't seen them around in the library, but believes that they might be kept in the stack. Uru asks her whether they can see the stack, but she tells her that only the librarian can let them have a look at that. Hotaro has had enough of these thoughts talking to each other, and like an absolute chat he simply starts walking outside the door. He is however stopped by Uru, who has vowed to herself that she will make this poor man's life hell. She tells him that they are going to wait for the librarian, and while they were arguing about that, Satoshi chimed in between, asking Ibarra to recount the mystery that she was talking about earlier. Hotaro thinks to himself that he is never going to see the end of it. Ibarra tells a mystery, which makes Uru curious, but Ibarra starts the story. She tells them that for some time now, she's been noticing a mysterious pattern in a book. She explains that she stays over in the library every Friday, and for some reason, every Friday a book is borrowed from the library during the lunch break, and is then returned by the end of the day. This is very confusing, because when you borrow a book you can keep it for a week before returning it to the library, but for some reason the person who borrows it always returns it the very same day. Uru asks her excitedly whether she can have a look at the book, and Ibarra takes out the book for her, which is a really beautiful hardcover leather-bound book about the history of the school. Uru comments that the book looks pretty, and everyone agrees. Hotaro meanwhile, is trying to ignore all of this and decides to keep reading his book, as he just wants to get the anthologies and go back home. Peru however is not going to let the lad have his leisure time, and keeps putting the book in front of his eyes, while Hotaro looks at her like he wants to slap her. He looks at it and says that maybe it isn't such a big deal, and that some students won't have a look at it during his free time. Ibarra however, tells him to have a look at the people who are borrowing the book. It turns out that every single time there is a different person borrowing the book. This is perplexing, because why would different people borrow the same book every single week, and follow the same pattern of borrowing it during their lunch break and returning it by the end of the day? This is indeed very intriguing, and even Hotaro seems very confused. He however doesn't want to spend any energy on such things, and tries to weasel his way out of it, but Uru continuously pesters him by putting the book in front of him. Ibarra finally tells them to settle down, and not make much noise in the library, and they shut up immediately. He looks at Uru hopefully, thinking that she will back off, but she isn't backing off, and seems to be really headstrong in making him help her solve this case. Hotaro finally ends up conceding, realizing that he will not be able to shake her off, and that it would be an inefficient use of energy. Her eyes light up as she gets really excited about it. He sits down and finally starts racking his brain on it, and he tells them that this book is definitely not being used for literary purposes, as no one could read a history book that big during that time. He states that the book is being used for ulterior purposes, and asks everyone if they have any bright ideas. Ibarra says that the books, if stacked up just right, can be used as pillows. Satoshi claims that if you attach this book to your arm, it can be used as a shield. Hotaro looks at them with contempt, but Big Brain Uru tells them to stop joking around, as obviously that is not what the books will be used for. Hotaro turns towards her in anticipation, hoping for a good idea, but alas, this guy is surrounded by a bunch of people who have the collective IQ of a brick wall. She replies that the best use for a book like this would be to use it as a pickle preserver, and Hotaro has enough, and tells them to shut their trap, so that he can think. He thinks hard but is unable to get any clues as to what the book might be used for if not for reading. He starts placing some clues together, the first one being that everyone who borrowed the book was a girl and all of them belonged to class 2. He proposes that it might be a signal of yes or no. For example, if the book is kept upright, it's a yes, and if it is inverted then it is no. Ibarra however tells them that this should not be the case, and takes them to the place where she keeps everyone's books, and all of them are kept randomly. Now Hotaro out of answers, and Ibarra makes fun of him for not being able to think of anything, but suddenly the weird-ass Uru starts smelling the book like a total bitch, and Ibarra gets scared of her weird antics, backing off, when suddenly Uru says that the book smells of paint. Ibarra tries to smell it, but she says that she can't smell anything. Hotaro however suddenly has a bright idea, and tells Uru to go and check on something for her, however forces him to come along as well, which again annoys the crap out of him, but he has no energy to argue anymore, and simply goes alongside her. He leads them all to the art class, and comments that there is only one class that happens on Friday.